All right. So I initially got into the industry guiding an EverQuest way back in 1999. That's where Sean and I met. Um, and I was actually hired. I don't know if you knew this or not, but I was actually hired to come out to San Diego to work um, right after I finished school. And for some strange reason, I never got an offer letter. I just remember getting a phone call from Alan being like, "Hey, so you're supposed to start today." I'm like, "Did not know that." And
So
my roomie.
I remember it differently. I remember it being we tried to hire both you and your roommate,
Mhm.
but you wanted to stay on the East Coast. So I've been telling the story wrong.
No, no. So it was a little bit of both because I mean, I guess they expected me to pack up and move like the next day, but they had never given me any like firm offer letter. And at that point, because I hadn't heard anything, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and stay out this way because I'm already here. And my roommate Jeff, he went. So I remember when he packed up and went out that way. But I'm a little more cautious. And Jeff is still working for, I guess, Daybreak. So it worked out for him. He's still in Austin. Actually had dinner with him last year, I think it was. But so yeah, after that, I ended up getting a job with Dark Age Camelot. A friend of mine who was a guy was like, "Hey, Mythic is up in your area and they're hiring." So I was like, "All right, fine." I sent in a resume, and I remember this actually happened. I went to the beach that weekend. They're like, "Hey, can you come in for an interview this week?" It's like, "No, I've got plans." So that was early September of 2001, and I ended up going in and interviewing and getting hired September 10th, 2001. And that's kind of crazy because I think about that because the very next day was even crazier. And I was there I was at Mythic until the end of 2000, until August 5 on the original game. I started out in CS, but I was in CS for like 2 or 3 months. And I worked on, yeah, like I said, I worked on the original game, just kind of a frontline content developer. And a lot of folks may remember this who played the game, but a lot of the dungeons after level 30 and above were not itemized. So that was kind of the first thing that we did, after the game had already been out for like 4 or 5. Then I moved into doing encounters and working. Um, we worked on a couple expansions. And it was a great team. When we first started working there, and I don't know if you were like this when Sony was still, I guess, Barrett or 989 Studios, but it's like we had this kind of small, intimate office of like 40, 50 people. And, it felt like a family atmosphere, which was awesome. You didn't mind pulling 10, 12 hours. And it was great. We worked with a lot of, and then, we kind of blew up around the time of the first expansion. And it's just went like a normal game studio. You just trying to, you know, capitalize on success. And after a while, it just became okay. Well, I need to change. I've been working on this game for like 4 years. I even worked on Imperator for a little while.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Because I've been saying that I thought you had worked on Imperator,
Mm-hmm.
and because I remember there being at least like one E3 or something where we met up and it was going on.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I think that was 2004. So yeah, it would have been 2004. Because you guys, I think, were at that point. We're trying to. You guys had like Star Wars Galaxies in the black box that year with security guards in front. I remember that.
Okay.
And
So was that 2004 then? Maybe
uh,
2000, the previous one.
2003. I'm trying to remember
Maybe.
because I went to. Oh man, yeah, because I went to. I remember our first E3. I think that was my first E3 rather was 2002, and I believe our I believe our game. I want to make sure I had this right. Our game was we had some kind of publishing deal with Vivendi, and so we have our booth, and we're showing our game. Right next to us is World of Warcraft,
Yeah.
And at this point, they were just running around as dark elves or night elves rather, and there's no magic. It's like you're running around this world, and you're kind of looking at this like, okay, I see it has potential. And then I think the bad boy at that point was oh my god, Wolfpack Studios' Shadowbane, and so we remember us going over there and looking at that, and man, that was a hot mess.
So,
oh my god.
So Nick just came in a chat, confirmed Planetside and Swig release was 2003, May and June respectively.
Okay.
There was a question DC Raid Boss asked, so you came into did you come into Dayak before launch?
So yes. So when I started in CS, it's September of 2001. I believe the game launched in October of 2001. So technically, yes, I was there, and the game had already been in full development. There were a lot of folks. Yeah. So at that time, Mythic was in this townhouse office complex in Fairfax, and CS was in this one building, and we didn't have a whole lot of space. And I think initially there were maybe 6 to 8 of us, and then you had the development side. And those guys, because it was actually funny because we had our internet. We were basically hijacking our own internet because we had this little tube that shot out the window by the CS pit, and anytime the delivery van parked in front of it, we lose our internet. It's kind of a problem when you're an online game service. But yeah, so I did that from September to December, so of 2001, and then I was development from 2002 on.
Okay. There were a couple questions that I want to make sure we don't miss, otherwise Bunny will be very mad at me. So one question is, how much consideration in development for Dayak was there with the balance of items and how things are added for PvE would affect RVR?
All right, so the first part of that, as far as how much went into it, how much thought. So we had a couple of really good item people, a guy named Eric, and I believe his assistant was a girl named AC. And they had this spreadsheet that was really, really good about balancing the abilities of the items that were being put in the game, so weapons and gear and whatnot. And they were really hardcore with it. They did a really good job putting stuff into the game. Now, again, a lot of this was way post-launch, so it took a while to catch up. With regard to PvP, that one was a little different, largely because when PvP was first out, it really, I don't believe, was much of an issue because everyone had access to the same weapons, at least until Trials of Atlantis. Once it came out, that was, I think, Charlie Foxtrot comes to mind, but that one wasn't handled as well. Now, they did as well they could with, they bounced out as much as they possibly could. The problem was kind of a mandate to make the items more Q-like, meaning, powerful, and, there was a lot of player investment on the PvE side for items that would be used in PvP. And there was dev pushback, but you know how it goes. But prior to Trials of Atlantis, prior to TOA, I think they did a fantastic job balancing the items.
Okay. And then I'm going to get Bunny's last question, and I'll grab your question, Nick. Were you at Mythic when they were bought by EA and had to move offices a bunch of times during war development?
I left. EA was snooping around when I left. I left in August 2005. I went to Turbine and worked on Dungeons and Dragons Online. But I mean, at that point, they're vetting, so we knew it was coming down the pipe.
Cool. Thank you for answering those. Nick asked, were there any cool features or ideas for Dayak that were discussed but never implemented or cut due to technical reasons, etc.?
Oh, Lord, yeah. I mean, so there was this idea of there was a problem at one point being underpowered with a problem. how do you make mages feel like they actually matter instead of just like, not being too overpowered, but then on the other hand, not being just completely dismissed because they don't provide enough of enough support. And I know we talked about an idea of this thing called linking or whatever, where mages could like link up to cast like powerful spells. And this was after the first expansion was already out. God, there were a lot of other ideas. There was a guy named Roy, and another guy named Maurice. They were largely important for that because I did most of the live side stuff, like the rebalance of the dragons and whatnot. So I don't, man, because that stuff's almost 20 years old, so I don't remember all the ideas, but there were a lot of things kicking around that we didn't get in.
Yeah, I run into a ton here. One of the cool things about doing a stream has been just how much information like chat has. I mean, the amount of just EverQuest knowledge in chat at any given moment allows me to continue to be the dummy I am, but then go, yeah, I don't remember how any of this works. And they'd be like, just complete breakdown of it. So it's pretty awesome.
And I will say though, as far as technical limitations, we had a great server side developer named Brian, and like we really went out to try to like, I guess, personalize encounters. A lot of the functionality that we had at launch doesn't compare to what came in later, like trying to simulate some kind of AI. Roy was probably like that dude had some ridiculous ideas. Like, I don't know if any of these folks played Trials of Atlantis. There was like this heart harpy encounter. No, it was a chess encounter. He did this chess encounter where you interacted with the chess pieces, and that dude literally had to spend a month, if not longer, on that encounter, and it was fantastic. I mean, just the stuff that dude came up with is just amazing.
Right on. I'm trying to find a good way to get us back into some of the details of what it was just like to be in development in general on MMOs during that period. Mm-hmm. But I also want to give you the chance to sort of go through the rest of your CV, and then we can pop back to it, I guess.
All right. So which one do you start? Which one do you want to start with first?
Let's have you go through your CV. Okay. So we finish getting that well-rounded view of kind of who you are based on that, and then we'll come back and we'll just dig into, with the time that we have,
sure,
making games.
Yeah, no. So after I left Mythic, I went and worked on Dungeons and Dragons Online up at Turbine in Boston. That was again another fantastic team, and for the most part, I got into D&D with some coworkers while I was at Mythic. So going and having largely Forgotten Realms and the Dragon. So when I got the opportunity, I was like, this is cool. I've been in DC and Virginia for long enough. Let's broaden my horizons. And so I went and worked on that project from development until launch. And again, it was a lot of fun. I can honestly say that I never really liked the world of Eberron. It never made a whole lot of sense to me. But that was what we were doing. On the one hand, it was cool because it was open. There wasn't a whole lot known. There wasn't a whole lot of lore, so we could play around with it a little bit. But I also remember that there was some weirdness, like dealing with like we had, I believe contractually, we had to deal with Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, so they both had like veto power and things. I remember at one point, like art director came out and was working on this one count area with the Dark Dwarfs, and she had a problem with the color brown, I think it was, and it was just like, okay, it's underground and you don't look brown or whatever. But I was only there for a year, and as much as I loved working at Turbine, I just really didn't. So I ended up taking a position at KingsIsle, working for Tom Hall on this product that never actually came out, called Socia, which was this online social game. And to this day, I don't think it's ever announced, but everyone who's working the project or in that building knows of the project because a lot of legacy. Yeah,
I forgot about that.
Oh, that's right. You worked there too.
Yeah. I was there for a couple of years, and I remember old Socia, I guess, team and discussions of what it was meant to be, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremiah, I'm keeping an eye on Zoom. Zoom gives me a handy read on your connection, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know, chat, if you're seeing a message pop up. I see a connection message every once in a while pop up, but that may be in the bot. It'll be okay.
All right.
I've finally fixed my connection on this end, so now I can start to blame the Americans for their internet. No offense, but yeah. So every once in a while, I may get you to repeat something if it broke up. So you were there for Socia. I totally forgot about that. And yeah, so then from there,
there's a question in here. Yes, I was a DDO from launch. So I worked on, let's see here. I worked on the game from launch, and I believe some of my modules included there was a vampire encounter and a few other things. Like I said, the Dark Dwarves. Oh man, and I don't know what else was in there, but yeah, because I left in August of 2006. But yes, I was there at launch. And then yeah, Socia was a lot of fun. I mean, you worked there, so you know, not getting all those details, but yeah, Socia was one of those things where we were trying to just really find a good groove, and there was a lot of good ideas in that product. I mean, even that, like the housing and the mini games ended up in Wizard 101 actually. Like Wizard Stones was actually a game that was developed by a guy named Tamir for our product. And Gary, as you know, I mean, he was a housing king. Another one that was designed by, I believe it was David White who actually designed the housing. But I was there for 4 years, and you know, it was fun. And after I left there, I believe I went to a little startup called UTV Games and worked on a project called Faction, which was supposed to be free to play MMO game between heaven and hell.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, what can I say? And then I went and worked for Zynga on the Ville, and that was an interesting experience. Like Zynga was awesome to work for initially, and then I will say that folks that came in from your realm that kind of changed the atmosphere of that office before I left. And I think after that is when I moved to Germany, just to try to see if, you know, just to kind of see if I could, I guess, kickstart my passion for making games.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that about covers all the places I worked.
Yeah, because then you moved out of games and into the real world of software development.
Yeah, you know, when you get older, you know, and you have responsibilities and you can't live as a Ronin, it's kind of like, you know, you just want to drop anchor and kind of be able to squat in a place for, you know, more than 2 or 3 years.
Absolutely. It seems like it's been cool. I remember we used to discuss that a lot. It's like, man, look, how do I get a job potentially outside of games? And that's when you started doing like interaction design, UX stuff, and it was interesting to watch you progress into that and see that it was feasible if necessary.
Yeah, I was lucky because one of the things outside of, I think most people think game they have this idea that we mostly just play games all day. And then you have the people who just think that all we do is write stories all day. And I think it's a matter of, you know, kind of just getting people to understand. It's like, man, there are a lot of different disciplines in design. And I will say that I kind of had a bastardized, cobbled together experience because I started out as, you know, kind of a narrative kind of guy, right? Like you wrote your quests, you implemented your quests. So it was kind of, you did both, right? But then I was also working on tools and designing and kind of doing the troubleshooting and the UX of that stuff, right? So ultimately, it meant that in games, like a designer did everything. It was a catch-all. But I mean, you also have, you know, economy balancers or economy designers. You have, you know, system design, which is what I spent the latter part of my career doing. And you know, I was fortunate enough that I had a broad enough experience and range of experiences that you know, I was able to explain and show on my, you know, portfolio that, you know, yeah, it was a lot more than just, you know, writing a story about a dwarf who lost his hat, and can you please go return it?
Right. Yeah, and I remember the period when you were putting that together. It was eye-opening for me, and it allowed me to use a bit of what I saw there in conversations later on when I was trying to basically convey the same information to people. So I just piggybacked on your work on that one. Let's see. Question came up that was, did you ever consider working on Warhammer Online or Camelot Unchained?
So no, God, no. So there was a idea kicking around before I left about a Camelot prequel, I think it was. I want to say, and I don't remember the name of it. May have been Dawn of Camelot. But I think honestly that would have been somewhat appealing, just because Camelot was a lot of fun to work on. Like, I enjoyed the lore and the history and everything involved, and there was a lot to pull from. I mean, we could have delved more into the the mythical side of the elves, or more into kind of Midgard, aka Stunguard. And I mean, I think there was a lot more, as well as Albion with the Fisher King legends and things of that nature. So that stuff seemed kind of interesting. Warhammer, I was never a Warhammer fan. I didn't play it. I grew up. My first entry into role-playing games like pen and paper was Palladium days. So basically Robotech and that kind of stuff. And then then Dungeons and Dragons, the various worlds of that. And I didn't play the role-playing game, but I mean, I enjoyed the hell out of MechWarrior. So I mean, those are the kinds of things that I kind of enjoyed growing up. Warhammer, I just didn't have. I know there's a hardcore following for Warhammer. I really honestly didn't have a whole lot of interest in it.
So, question that just came up was, what's the most rewarding thing to design an MMO specifically, from Not in chat?
Honestly, I think really the most enjoying things are always about providing experience that people remember, that people enjoy. And I think in the case of my career, I think the dragons in Dark Age were kind of the most rewarding, because I don't know if anyone played the dragons initially, and you had to get like a 200 plus man raid to take the dragons down. It's back in those days, 2001, 2002, that was actually acceptable for some reason. But I ended up having to do a full redesign of the dragons, and I basically some new functionality we had. So it wasn't basically they just came in and blew breath fire on you and got your entire party. I actually put in some. Some warnings that were basically broadcast to the area, as well as like some little radiuses where if people were trying to sit outside the radius and attack the dragon where he could get to them, he basically just teleported folks, and so they couldn't do any damage to them. And it was really meant to get it down to like a more manageable 30 to 50 person raid. And people were doing it. Like, people weren't doing the dragons for like months. They just forgot about them. And so we did the rebalance and we did the encounters. Like, people really started going at them again and becoming part of the regular rotation, like stuff that they wanted to do for the game. And they rebalanced the loot, I believe, as well. So it made it all worthwhile. And then I think what ended up happening was I got a report, because I don't know if these people know this, but just about everything in games is tracked. But I got a report one day, and I can't remember if it was Sonya that told me or not. But they were like, yeah, so a group of like 5 people took the dragon down. And we're like, oh shit, really? And so went and looked at it, and it just found out that it took them like 2 to 3 hours to do it. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Like, I couldn't be mad at that. Like, they literally 2 to 3 hours taking the dragon down. I'm just like, I'm not going to change this. I mean, God bless them, man. That's good work. And I know a lot of people are like, well, that's not the intention. We should make this change. Like, nah, leave it alone, dude. I mean, they're doing it. This is what if this is what they're willing to do, they're willing to sacrifice 2 to 3 hours, man. Man, it's fine. So I think that was probably my favorite memory from working on games in general.
Right on. Bobby said, didn't know Dayak had dragons. Bobby, I didn't either. So I
Yeah,
was just kind of nodding along like, oh, dragons.
there are
Okay.
three. There are three. I believe.
Were they always in there?
No, they came. They were part of the. Oh man, there was a major update. Scott, I'm sure Scott or Sonny, probably Scott Jennings or Sonny Thomas. They probably remember the exact release. But I want to say it was the first major release I was a part of. Oh my god, there was a wolf dragon for Midgard. There was a red dragon, I think, Albion, and the elves had this weird glowing purple black dragon.
Cool.
But and they were all in their, they were all couched within the realm, so the other realms couldn't get to the dragon.
All right. So the question Nick just had was the prequel you mentioned, Dawn of Camelot, also going to be an MMO, or was it intended to be a different genre?
I think it was meant to be an MMO because that was Mark's. I believe that was Mark's brainchild. And I know he did for it, and it was basically before. I want to say it was before Arthur became king or something along those lines, or maybe it's just at the beginning of all that. But it wasn't very fleshed out, and there was just kind of mentions of it, so we knew there were. We kind of had an idea of the high level concept, but there weren't a whole lot of details.
Okay. You see Bobby's comment. I'll read it out anyway, just so people are listening at work. Bobby Bick says, I always thought Dayak had interesting design choices. I imagine it was awkward designing content that only 33% of the player base could see unless they made alternate characters.
Yeah, I mean, it was, but I think what we did is that we always try to kind of mirror encounters across the different realms so nobody felt left out. I mean, we knew people were going to make multiple accounts or have characters in different realms. But I mean, I think, yes, we made 3 times the content, but honestly, it was really just copying the AI and just putting it in a different body. So in the cases, it wasn't too bad.
And a question from Not says, do devs who work with MMOs tend to jump between MMOs, or do you also do do single player games in general?
As far as playing or just working on, I don't think I've ever worked. Well, that's not true. The social games, I guess, were technically. I never worked on a single player game and didn't do anything other than PC games, and that's largely because of a lot of thinking associated with working in the industry. A lot of folks don't think that. Like, I've talked to console companies where it's like, well, you've never worked on a console, so you don't necessarily, you may not have experience in creating a game for this system. And it works both ways. I've seen it during interviews where people who had console experience wanted to come work on MMOs. It's like, well, you've never worked on a PC game, so as if it's some kind of a knock against them. The reality is, man, if you can design or work on these things, I mean, you can do it. Anything that you don't know, I mean, in a lot of cases, you learn on the job because it's not too dissimilar.
Yeah, and I've seen especially good designers be able to flex in both directions. The one thing I have run into though is on the MMO side, because I've basically just only worked on MMOs, is having some people that have come in from console games or console even multiplayer games come into an MMO environment and not realize the complexity or not account for the player variable on this one, right? It's like,
yep.
And it's just, so coming in and just being focused on a very controlled cinematic moment and, or like having a lot of control over the environment is something that they had to try to break themselves of.
Yeah, I remember interviewing with a company who I won't name on a project I won't name that, needless to say, didn't come out. And they released a console game that was moderately successful. And I remember talking to them about an MMO that they'd been kicking around for a while, and it was pretty well publicized, especially in Austin. Everybody knew it, because everything's an open secret. And I remember asking them something about how they're going to handle, combat on an MMO. And they were like, yeah, well, we've got that already, planned. We our engine for the console, and it already handles that. But I'm like, but how do you handle the latency and working, having to do all this online? It's like, oh yeah, it works on the console, so we'll be fine. And it just kind of was like a major red flag because MMOs are some of the most complicated games you put together. Because it's not just on your screen and just whatever you're doing and just having to worry about the horsepower of your machine. It takes a lot more. And needless to say, I found out they actually didn't have like a network programmer on the team at the time. And so I remember talking to someone who interviewed for that position, like, yeah, man, it's a shit show. And it's just like some people just really don't understand how much work actually went in those games. So it's like, the fact that EverQuest and Camelot and WoW managed to do what they do and be successful at it was because you can always have, I don't know if you remember like early Anarchy Online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
this game at the time. But man, that game had all kinds of technical issues. Shadowbane, same thing. It's remember Horizons? You have a lot of games that just didn't factor that stuff in, and while they had great concepts, they just crashed and burned, literally.
Jeremiah, I think you just found the secret word, the name of the game that I've been trying to think of for like 2 weeks now. Horizons.
Ah, yes. The guys out of
need
Arizona.
to look that up. Yeah, because I could have sworn like Horizons was going to be like the end all be all. Like I could have sworn they committed to some crazy stuff with that game.
Vampires, dragons. They had a whole slew of things that everyone just like was excited about.
Playable dragons. That's right, reindeer. This is the one that's come to mind a few times. I was like, was it AC2? No, it wasn't AC2. It was Horizons. I gotta look that one up again because I could have sworn that was like just an epic tale of you're gonna do what? Yeah, dude. And to your point, I've interviewed at a couple companies as well, where while the interview is going on, I'm like, oh wow, this is going to be spectacularly bad. And by the end of it, it's just kind of like, thank you for having me out. I wish you guys the best.
Yeah.
We're good.
I'll call you.
Yeah, it happens every once in a while, and it's weird that you can see it when you come in, but they can't see it there. But that happens. So, dude, we'll continue to grab questions from chat, but I'm really curious. So, going back, I remember you were a guide, but did you already have like aspirations to get in the industry, or what got you into the industry back then?
I'm going to throw out another. I was working at Babbage's when EQ came out, and I remember seeing the box and thinking to myself, I was like, "Oh, this looks cool." But looking at the system requirements, man, I had a Gateway 2000 with like 8 megs of RAM or something like that, 4 megs of RAM. So this is way back in the day. So I was like, dude, I can't play this. And then I was like, oh, there's a $9.99 subscription involved too. F that, man. Like, you want me to pay $30 for this game, and then you want me to pay you $9 a month, $10 a month to play it. And so when I was working at Babbage's at the time, we used to have this policy where you could check out games and play them. So it gave you a little insight, so you could so when you're selling games and people were asking you about games, because there weren't a whole lot of review sites out there at the time that were really reliable, and people used to like coming to game stores.
There still aren't.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, so I remember talking to some coworkers, and they were like, "Yeah, dude, we're playing EQ," and they were extolling the version the game was. I'm like, "All right, fine, I'll check it out." They're like, "I'm gonna buy it, but I just want to check it out beforehand." And I honestly, at that point, I had no desire to work in games. I was studying chemistry, so I figured I'd be in a lab somewhere. And I started playing the game, and it was like, okay, this feels a lot like playing, Dungeons and Dragons. Someone just took that game and put it in my computer box, and like this is cool. And I played a dark elf. I played a dark elf wizard, not realizing that I was going to have the deck stacked against me. But Ultra Vision was pretty awesome. Having to worry about what was it, beetles, red eye beetles, whatever the hell it was. So anyway, I did that for 6 months, and I was level 50 or whatever. I guess when Kunark came out, they raised the level cap to 60.
Yeah.
So I remember as a wizard with Kunark, and not to trash a product, but I remember having a conversation with Jeff about this at Airs. Wizards were kind of shat on for Kunark. Like, our spells sucked. The only thing, we basically turned into glorified taxis. And I remember talking to Jeff about that at one point. It's like, and this may be true. I don't know if this is not. But wizards weren't really tested. It's like, it really felt that way when we had those drain spells, I think, which were like next to useless for a while. Anyway, so I found that while I was having a hard time getting groups, soloing Andrila. I won't forget that. I soloed Andrila from level 50 to level 55 outside the gate to Fear. And that's what I did for like most of the time that I played whenever I couldn't get a group, which was most of the time. So 90% of my time was spent doing that. And I had it down to a science. Like, I hear, I cast, I cast my spells, and I sit down again and meditate, wait for it to come back. But I found that to be kind of boring. So I ended up guiding. And I spent a lot more time guiding than I was actually playing the game. And the thing about guiding is that you're still doing you're not for gear, because you have all the best gear that's possibly available. You're essentially a god in the game. And it was just fun. Hell, I met you and I met several other people, through guiding. And I found it to be way more rewarding than, spending, hours playing the game. And I say 60 because, that's kind of a low number. Because I mentioned this to you the other day, where I remember at my wizard, I think I was just getting to level 35 with the permafrost looking for this crown. I literally was online for 30 hours straight, 32 hours straight, I think is what it was. And we were camping trying to get these crowns for three wizards. I got mine, and I was like, cool. We got the last one, and then we had a brown out in the apartment, and I lost my internet connection. And that was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I was like, I guess it's time to go to bed. But that was fun back in the day, back when I was in college. But with Kunark, like, that just wasn't a thing, because there wasn't a whole lot of content for me to really be able to be a part of, because people were min-maxing largely. It's like druids became more useful than wizards, and they could teleport too. So it's like, why have a wizard when these guys can heal? And so after doing guiding I actually guided longer than I played EverQuest. I don't know if you know that or not, but yeah, I guided for like from 99 to 2-1. So yeah, dude, and that kind of got my foot in the door, because I honestly, I when I had turned down the position at Sony, I just, you know what, I'm just going to come back, go back home, go back to Virginia, work, and take the LSAT and try to go to law school. And then Mythic came knocking and was like, well, hey, this is novel. I can actually make money instead of spending money. And so I ended up doing that, and it turned out to be a pretty fun career.
Yeah, Bobby, you're in Virginia, aren't you? Let me see, dude. There was a question up here. I love Virginia. Virginia is gorgeous. Parts of it not so gorgeous. But let's see. Scrolling up. Not asked.
Question for Hash, but yes, Mythic.
Okay, yes, Mythic. How common is creative fatigue in MMO teams, especially successful ones? I'll let you have fun with that one.
Oh God. Okay.
Oh,
so.
And we are at the 10-minute warning for you, but if you can stay longer, we'd love to have you. Just so
yeah,
you're
I can stay.
Cool.
I can stay. It's fine. Fatigue in games. So back in those days, fatigue. So I think whenever we first got in the industry, I don't know if this is true for you, but this is definitely true for me and some of the guys I came up with, is that, when you get into games, it's like a dream come true, man. It's like, wow, I'm making games. I love games. And so you don't mind, extra mile, working more than 8 hours to get this game, to get something into the game, especially something you're passionate about. Like I was actually commuting from Richmond, Virginia to Virginia for the first 6 months I was a designer. And for those who aren't familiar with the area, that's almost 100 miles each way.
You broke up. What, you from Richmond to where?
I was commuting from Richmond to Fairfax.
Fairfax.
Yep.
Beautiful.
For 6 months. So that is 100 miles just about each way. And you get in, start your day. I'd leave it just before 6 a.m. to get in, and I'd get in around 8ish. And I would stay until rush hour died down, with leave around 6 p.m. And that was fine for me. It's like, I'm 23 years old. This ain't no thing. And then you do that for a while, and it starts to, at first you're like, I'm able to do this. This is fine. And you do it for a while, and then you're like, you know what? I need to kind of you need to take the foot off the gas just a little bit and kind of cool off. But the thing is, and at that time, it was hard to do that because, we were trying to catch up with content. Eventually in the area. So, that plus commute, hour and a half commute turned to, 7 minutes, which was great. But I was still doing it. And I think Trials of Atlantis eventually broke me. Normal, people talk about 40 hours a week in games. That's almost never true, at least at that time. I don't know if it's true now, but back then it wasn't. If you weren't spending 50 hours at least, people will kind of give you the side eye. Like, technically, you put in, you're supposed to leave at 6 o'clock, but, or 5 or 6 o'clock. And in those days, if you tried to leave at 5 or 6 o'clock, people would be questioning your passion and whether or not you're committed.
What was it called? Like a 5 o'clock warrior or 5 o'clock champion? There used to be a term for it.
I honestly don't remember, but I think you're right. And so, it ended up, for a while there, like for Trials of Atlantis, for a good 4 solid months, we were working 60 to 80 hours a week. I remember getting to work at 8 o'clock, leaving at 6, going home, eating dinner, going downstairs to my personal computer, logging back into the server, and working until 12 to 1. And that was for a good solid 4 months. And I hit a point where I just burned out. Like, I just didn't care anymore. Like, I just couldn't bother looking at it. And, and a lot of people felt that way. That's why I think a lot of people ended up leaving Camelot to go work on Imperator. Not because they had this, passion for classical Roman architecture, or just, the idea of Imperator. It was just like, it's not Camelot. I need something new.
Right.
But yeah, fatigue was a big deal. That was true even when I was working at, I think, Zynga. We had this push. I don't know if people remember this or not, or even know about this, but the product I worked on called the ended up getting sued by EA because they had the Sims social game, and our game damn near seemed like was an exact copy of it. But there was this push. I remember management sent this email saying, we made a difficult decision to crunch. And what that meant was, at the time, is that the dev team would crunch, but not the executives. And so, yeah, it was prevalent in almost every company I worked at to some degree, and usually just before launch. So it was usually a few weeks here or there before some kind of release. But you saw it and you kind of like, yeah, this is not good, because on the one hand, you'll have folks who, will tell you that, if you're not crunching, you're not working, you don't care. But the reality is, if you're crunching, it's because of bad management from whoever is tracking the schedule. And, you can't, for whatever reason, they didn't feel like they could cut things and just add them later. It was just like, it all has to be in now, even though people aren't going to like several weeks. It just all has to be done now. So yeah, that was very prevalent during the time I worked. I don't know anyone of all the contexts that I've had in the industry, I don't know any of them who didn't crunch.
Yeah. And so there's the crunch fatigue, there's a creative fatigue, I think, on top of that as well. And then there's also, heaven forbid you have anything going on in your life.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a question, slightly different topic, but I want to make sure that we don't scroll past it. Sitzall asked, uncertain if you were around at the point where Agramon Island was released, but are you familiar with what the original intent behind the series of demonic seals atop the very center? There were rumors of summoning the demon lord Agramon.
So I think this is the first expansion that was done after I moved off of Camelot to Imperator. And I actually don't know, but I may somewhere still have like the design document for this thing, like the actual Word document. So I honestly don't know the story behind it. So some of the stuff that was done, there was a really good designer who came up when I left, in Jen Ortiz, and I know she had a hand in a lot of stuff. So if there was any of the cool stuff, it was probably her.
So chat wants you to leak the document. I cannot condone that in this stream. But if you get on our Discord and you make friends and information is released over time, I don't think we can be blamed or held liable on the stream. And I said we because all of a sudden the stream will become very we and not me. I'd be like,
right.
Let's see. The next question was Reindeer Knight. Said, your wizard story made me think of something. When players are frustrated with their class power, they often say things like the devs hate that class. My question is, what leads to class imbalance, and why can it take a long time to change underpowered classes?
The honest answer to that is, I think people misunderstand balance in a lot of ways. Balance doesn't necessarily mean equal. Thing that people, that's what I always hear. Seeing the message boards, and back in the days of Camelot, we had the private boards where the team leads for the classes would be, and a lot of what happens is that you have people working on it, but trying to bring a class more in line with where people want them to be who play it. It's always a perceived weakness that my class can't do what X class can, and it's a two-part thing, really, because sometimes it's just a perception. Sometimes it's really true. Like for me, I could say that I really know that my wizard was underpowered just because of the fact that I could never get groups. But I know on the days of Camelot, like sometimes you will have classes that you will have people who post on message boards, and a lot of times it's the vocal minority. And what ends up happening is that the vocal minority, they just drown out everybody else because they're constantly pounding the same thing. And someone high enough in the chain may see this and be like, you know what? I play this class and I feel the same way. And now I've got proof that, I'm not feeling this way. And so they'll take that as a action item. And then, a lot of times there is just really, people don't fully know how to play their class. Like, we'll take Dark Knights in EverQuest, right? Dark Knight should have never been as powerful melee-wise as a warrior. Warrior is meant to be... Sorry, Shadow Knight.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was going to grab it before chat got it.
Yeah. So the Shadow Knight was never supposed to be, on par with a warrior just for, pounding something, right? They weren't supposed to have the hit points, they weren't supposed to have armor, but what they did have was the ability to cast some spells, which kind of leveled the playing field, right? Because I believe then they have life tap.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you have this ability.
Series.
Yeah, you have this ability to get your health back, but the warrior didn't have that, right? So in that regard, it's kind of a balance, whereas it's not equal. But to go back to answer your question, really comes when it comes to addressing those issues, it's trying to look at and seeing what the problem actually is. Do you have a series of abilities that just suck that aren't useful, because the concept was like, well, people would use it this way, but I mean, and I'm sure Sean speak to this. It's like the idea thing, but in reality, it's people do something completely different that you never expected. Like in Camelot, we had the stunning series with Midgard, which is why they're called Stun Guard, and everybody knew that that was a problem, and it was eventually fixed, but it took a while, because anytime you try to weaken or nerf another class or another group, then all of a sudden the people who've been quiet are all of a sudden, very vocal about how you made their class useless. And I can't play like this anymore. So I mean, it's a tough balancing act, no pun intended. But it's tough to try to get everything in line to where it should be, because you don't really know you see people doing it, and it's just really getting a lot of data.
Yeah, and then there is the flavor of the month challenge that C4113 mentions, where it's the unintentional. All of a sudden, someone figures out how to do this thing that makes them even better, and now we've got the imbalance. But so there are a couple of questions that have popped up, going back to your guide experience. Mr. Goodman asked, any good guide stories in relation to player discipline? Those are always pretty funny to hear. We do talk about those here. And then Bobby asked, did you ever take control of a monster in those big GM events from back in the day? So we've got a couple guide questions.
So it's easier for me to answer this first guide question from when I was working in Camelot. When I was in Camelot, early on, there was a warp, I guess, that people were using, where people were just literally punching in coordinates and going to specific locations. At first it was it was easy to catch, because you'd see someone, all of a sudden they're gone, and you're trying to figure out if it's latency or not. But it's a hack. And what I used to do is I would literally snoop somebody, which meant that I could see their chat and every conversation that they were having, guild chat, personal chat, whatever. If it was in game, it was. And I remember following this guy one time, which was a command. And he, people, and when people warp, it's like everyone would file a petition. Anyone around them would file a petition. So I found the guy, which was easy enough. And then I started following, and I'm just sitting there watching him and reading this chat. Not a whole lot's going on. All of a sudden, he just teleported, was just gone. But he's still talking. And so I went back to him again. And, as he's walking around, it's like I'm following him, and he stops again, and then he teleports again. And then I remember the guy was like, hey, man, so we got reports that you're doing this thing, you're warping. And I don't remember what the spiel was at the time, but just like, I remember talking to him about it. He's like, oh, dude, I'm not chat. I'm not doing this. And he immediately goes to chat and starts talking to people in his guild about, hey, man, I'm talking to the guy. I'm totally doing this, and he can't do it. And I was like, and so I interrupted his guild chat. I was like, yeah, dude, I'm totally sitting here watching you do this. And he just got banned. And, seeing him get kicked off the server, everyone in his guild was like, oh, shit. So, I mean, that's one of the first ones. There are a whole lot of other things like that, because people do some really shitty things. I'm not going to lie. But, I mean, it's especially when you don't think you're paying attention. But there are a lot of stories like that. And I'm sure there are other juicy stories that other people can tell you, but that's one of the cleanest ones I can tell you.
I will not confirm or deny the ability of customer service to do what Jeremiah just said in EverQuest, but it is hypothetically, it is funny the shit that people say when they think it's like, what do I tell them? Well, just lie to him. Okay, but what should I say? And you're just like,
yeah.
TCE 2030, thank you for the follow. Let's see. And did you participate in any of the GM events or live events or anything? I know as a GM I did a bunch, but I don't remember if I did any as a guide.
I'm sure I did some as a guide, but I mean, I think for me, on 7th, I knew a lot of folks on that server, not because I played with them, but people saw me enough that and I think also coming from the player perspective, I wasn't super hardcore about anything, so I was kind of more easygoing about certain things. It's like, I think back then, I think more people would have been happy that I showed up than some of the other folks. But I mean, I think that, there were things that went on, sort of like weddings, or even as far as game events, like, you'd sit there and you would just watch, basically. I mean, because you don't want to use your abilities. You don't want anyone to feel like they're getting some kind of advantage. It's like, look, I'm just sitting here. I don't have any weapons in my hand. I'm literally just sitting here cross-legged watching it. And we always got permission before we did anything like that, because we don't want there to be any sense of impropriety. But I mean, those were fun back in the days. And I think that's the thing that made guiding a lot of fun, is that it was just really interacting with people and just hanging out and shooting shit. It was just fun.
Yeah, there was something to doing customer service where you would actually appear and be face to face with your customers in like this badass setting. Like, it made it a little more interesting, I guess, than like just responding to an email of like, okay, we've looked into it and your item's now on your account. It was more like, oh shit, we investigated. We think you're telling the truth. Here's your item. At which point, then he tells his friend, dude, they totally bought it. I just got a free item. And then, yeah, you've got to suspend them. But like, Not asks, I know many artists look at their older work and just hate it, and they see nothing but flaws. Is it like this for designers? Do you ever think back and wonder what you're thinking with regards to design decisions? I know I've never questioned any of my design decisions. Jeremiah, you?
You must be one of the few. Yes, I think that I look back at everything thinking about how I could have done something better. But I mean, that comes with experience, right? It's like you did something, it seemed like a good idea at the time, and then you come back looking at it a little bit later, it's like, man, I could have done that too, and that would have been really awesome. But I mean, if you do it the next time, I think that one of the things that I learned from working on Camelot specifically is that as I was playing the game, I could not play it from the standpoint of just being it's like I was seeing flaws and problems that either I introduced or the guy I sat next to introduced. And you just couldn't play the game objectively. It's like you're playing and you just couldn't switch that side off. So I just got to the point where I had to really stop playing the games I worked on because I enjoyed them. Right. I couldn't enjoy playing them. I could still enjoy working on them and still doing things and getting, hearing feedback and watching people suffer to my content. But honestly, yeah, I don't think there's anything I ever put in that I didn't say, what, I could have done that just a little bit better.
Yeah. No, and it's especially tough when you let something slip through and it doesn't get caught at any point in the process. And the second you see it, you're like, oh shit, man, I can't believe I let that happen. I definitely feel guilty. Nora86, thank you for the follow. Thanks for being here. Another question. A previous avid player from Canuck to Omen's War, just want to let you know. Oh, okay. I was going into question mode instead of reading first. Hey, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Keep hanging out. Jeremiah, you went down a different path than the EverQuest path with us. Unfortunately, I know we wanted to have you. Apparently, whoever was supposed to send you your actual offer didn't want you to be there as much as we wanted you to be there, or they were just not doing their job right that day. But thank you for the compliments. Keep hanging out here. And what is that name? Angid. I'm baffled. Usually I'm not this bad on names.
Ange DeSames 86.
Ange DeSames 86. Thank you, Jeremiah. Reindeer Knight. I got summoned by a GM in EverQuest with my friend. It's Angie. All right. I was going to go for Angie, but then it's like, no, dude, it's not Angie. Cut it out. Right on. So thanks for being here. And Reindeer Knight said, I got summoned by a GM in EverQuest when my friend and I did a level 1 duel on Vishen to get the message in our player names broadcast. And it was something like, Fires of Heaven has been defeated by Plane of Sky in our duel. Back when that message was a thing, I guess.
Done those.
Yeah. Not the best choice on that. Cool.
I also remember letting a player kill me just so they could get it across that they killed a guide.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't ever do that, I don't think. And Angie, sorry, I don't know what it was about the name. It just made me so awkward. Also, I guess it was the compliment about Kunark and Omens of War, and then I felt like maybe you would feel left out because you didn't work on those things like I did, Jeremiah.
Yes, no, that's cool.
I did that. Cool, man. All right. Rather than me continue to make it even more awkward, I have another question for you.
Let's do it.
So, the design path itself, I mean, we talked about how you got into the industry.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, was there a lead up to it? For me, design was completely accidental. Well, I guess not my history. I guess not. But yeah.
I mean, my entire game career is accidental, right? I mean, I had no intention of getting in games. Like, I did EverQuest as guiding in EverQuest as a way to not have to worry about paying for my account.
Right.
I mean, I had no intention, until I had no intention of actually, working in games. And I remember we went out to the fanfare in 2001 in San Diego. And I don't even remember Jill or not. But we stayed. Jeff and I stayed at Jill's place, and we actually came to the office. I think when you were on, was it Tremont Square? What was that road called back in the day?
Jill from Sony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now I do.
Jim Bay.
Yep.
So we actually came into the office and guided from the office. I think I was sitting next to Frida. I don't know her name. And
Frida,
yeah, and so that was really cool to just sit there working with you guys, and that was they made us the offer at the fanfare to San Diego. I was like, yeah, this is cool. I remember we went and looked at the places, and because we just really couldn't find it. But when I applied at Mythic, I honestly just sent in my resume, not expecting to ever hear anything back from them. Because I mean, the reality is like you get the impression that just about anybody, I mean, anyone can do CS, honestly, right? I mean, but you'd expect them to be flooded with applications, and you almost don't expect to hear from them. And then when they got back to me like the next day, I was kind of like, oh, okay. And so yeah, I mean, I went into interview. I remember going into my interview, I was wearing a suit and tie, and this was July or August in Virginia. So it was hot as balls. And I walk into the office, and I'm greeted by the CS manager at the time, a guy named Jason, and he's wearing a T-shirt and jeans and black. It's like, okay, well, they have a relaxed atmosphere. And then I walked by what would eventually become a guy named Eric wearing a hat that just basically said, fuck you. And I'm like, wow, I'm definitely overdressed. and so I, interviewed, and, they were like, we'll let you know. And, but it seemed good. And, I got an offer later that day. So, I mean, I was like, all right, cool. And then, so, I expected that I was going to do this for a little while just to kind of save up some money, pay off student loans, and then, like I said, potentially go to grad school or something. And then I moved over into development, and I was like, okay, this is a whole different beast. And, like I said, started off doing just kind of frontlining, just doing anything that they needed, So, right. I mean, it was monster population, putting monsters in dungeons. It was, then it turned into like encounters and doing some text here and there. Then it was also quests, and then it turned into building dungeons. Then it turned into designing a tool to build dungeons, and then working on the tool to populate dungeons in the rest of the world. So I found that system side was a lot more fun and creative to me than the other content side. And so every place I worked, I mean, although when I went to BDO, I still did content creation, but I was also doing a lot of the same stuff. We didn't do as much on tools because they had their own tools, legacy tools that had been around. And then when I went to KingsIsle, I worked with the tools guy there as well, because I would say that in my entire 15 years in the industry, Mythic had the best tools of any product I worked with. Like by bar none, no one had created tools flexible or as good as what they had created in Mythic.
And
so everywhere I went, it was to get to that same level. And because content takes a while, and we might, 80 hours working on an encounter that the player spend like maybe 30 minutes to 2 hours working on, right. To complete. So it's like we spend exponentially more time creating content than they consume it.
Right.
So trying to speed that up became more important in a lot of ways.
And when you look at how that prepared you for what you're currently doing, do you feel like that was a very natural progression into your current work, or did you feel like you had to kind of restart a little bit when you got out of games?
It was a little bit of both. Because now I do everything in Illustrator, as opposed to in some company's proprietary tool. Yeah. Be it writing script in XML script or Lua script or whatever. And I in a lot of ways, it's easier because you don't have 1,000 people on the VM boards talking about how much you suck, right? So, but I mean, I think it's still just as meaningful because the work you're doing is helping people do things easier, giving them more confidence in making things. Like when I was working on a product in Zynga, like the developers and the designers were all working in the same server. So if a designer is trying to make a minor change, like adding a line of text, just something that appears on the screen, and they forget the closing parentheses, they crash the server, and 30 developers are pissed off because left out a parentheses, closed parentheses, and so that's a lot of time for everybody. But all in all, I still think that I think the biggest change really was learning Illustrator. But I also feel like the learnings from just games in general, things that people are willing to do, I think it puts you also in a different mindset, right? Because I know a lot of times people just want to they want to dismiss a complaint from a customer or player. It's like, oh, that player is just dumb or whatever, they just don't get it. And the reality is like, if you empathize with it a little bit, it's like sometimes just assume that the customer or the player is lazy. They didn't read something all the way through. That's really what it is most of it. Because people have a limited amount of time and they want to do, they want to rush through a lot of text and they don't want to read it. So how do you make this to where they don't necessarily have to read as much? Because you remember back in the day, man, it's like EverQuest had tons of dialogue and tons of text, right? And it got to the point where, like, even in EverQuest, it's like when you're doing a quest, you just look for the underlying link, right? That's the thing that you need to get.
You can click the bracketed words now, so it's a little bit easier, but still, it's not the most intuitive. Yeah.
So it's all of that has kind of fed into it's fed into how I view what I do and how I take that into account, like who I'm trying to help, really. Right. So
all right, I've got another one after this, but Brandon asked, what was the process to get a unique GM event item award approved? So I probably have more exposure to that than Jeremiah did. So we had a notebook that showed us what events we could run, basically how to set them up, what the codes were to turn into certain monsters or turn players into certain things. And then it had a list of items. If we wanted something added to that for whatever reason, then we would have to send it up to the developers, and honestly, it's pretty hit or miss back in the day as to whether or not you're going to get any sort of response. So yeah, that was how it worked. And I remember that from my GM experience. But yeah, let's see. And she said back when EQ came out, it didn't have those words with the bracket. It's like trying to figure out. Oh, it didn't have the words with bracket. You had to figure it out. Yeah, they didn't all have brackets, right? I could have sworn that was like a newbie sort of apprentice thing we had to go back and do, is try to make things a little more intuitive in text.
Right, because I seem to recall you having to repeat the special phrase back to them to continue on with the dialogue. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just in chat. And then later on, we used that fact to hack scripting by making invisible words that players couldn't see, that NPCs could hear, and we would shout them all over the zone so that we could get NPCs to do things that they weren't intended to do.
It's funny because I mean, I look back at the stuff that we were willing to do in EverQuest and put up with EverQuest because it was really the first successful MMO, right? I mean, it was the first major one, and I know Richard Garrett's, Ultima Online was there, and Meridian 99, 59,
Meridian 59.
Yeah, 59? But I mean, 59. But I mean, EverQuest was like the first one that was really approachable, and then that we were willing to put up with. It's like, it's just part of the game. I mean, and we carried that into Camelot, and we tried to make some things a little bit easier, hyperlinks and whatnot, so you can click on text. But then when you look at like what WoW did, like WoW really watered that down and made themselves so much more accessible than both of us,
Yeah.
And it's just crazy just how the genre progressed. But it's also really cool though, right? I mean, because each game brought new people into into the genre, and they might be willing to check out some of these other games.
But it's crazy, man. So Jasmine and I were running errands earlier today, and we had a conversation about this very thing. And I looked at her dead serious, and I said, okay, so if we were to make a new game, there would be no quest assistance. There would be no seeing who has a quest. We take it back to the old school EQ. And there would be no record of what you have to do next, only whatever you completed last. There'd be a journal that say you did this. And we'd send your ass straight back to the message board, straight back to the cheat sites, straight back into the community, straight back into OOC. Like, hey, who do I talk to? Just to make you talk to some other people. That's it. So that's my plan. People are like, when are you going to make another MMO? I'll just keep throwing ideas like that out, and they'll stop asking. They'll be like, don't make another MMO. That's horrible. But that's my thought on it. Turnip
That's pretty hardcore.
Turnip asked, which company that you worked for took the best care of its employees?
That's a tough one. I think of the companies I worked for, I honestly would have to say that Zynga probably did the best job. And I think, I mean, it's the same. It's the same thing that most people have, and when they work, the kind of culture that they have. And I think people get the idea that working in games, it's literally all fun and games in games. Some are a little more corporate, like with Mythic. We had our annual Christmas party. We had our, we had our weddings, although those were kind of, discontinued because of one bad night involving alcohol. Company that he and I both worked at together didn't seem to get the whole idea that, even though you spend 40 plus hours a week, in assault mines, like you might want to be able to just kind of go catch a movie, like a release of a Star Wars movie or whatever, Lord of the Rings for us. But I think Zynga had the best. I think I had the best experience with them. We had our quarterly parties. We had our, I remember one year they gave us, 3DSs, like the entire dev team 3DSs. So this was like 2010, 2011. There was always some kind of quarterly thing to look for. They sent us a beer pong table. We had sit-down arcades. We had catered. We had lunches in the break room. We had snacks. And that's a double-edged sword. If you have stuff in the break room, you're less likely to leave the office, so you're more productive, or you're at least in the office. Yeah. So that can work against you. There was always fruit, coffee. It's the little things, where you don't feel like you're being nickel and dime. And I think that Zynga was very good and very generous in that regard, more so than anybody else I worked with.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I do think the company you might have been referring to did get a little bit better on the take you to the Alamo, watch a movie, get a little bit of food front. I think I may be misremembering, but yeah. The free beer in Hamburg at Big Point was every Thursday they unlocked the beer fridges, and we had that nice courtyard. That was nice.
It was.
So it was a nice way to sort of hang out. But let's see. Did the lack of quest guidance lead to a lot of GM tickets? Turnip asked. I'm trying to think. I think we got a fair amount of like, hey, I think this quest is broken because it wasn't intuitive, or hey, I think this quest is broken because the NPC legit ate your items. So I do think it was, you could say generally the lack of quest guidance, or the sort of lack of sophistication of the quest system at the time definitely generated tickets. I still think we could do a pretty like not hard to figure out, pretty unstructured quest system, and maybe still avoid some of those problems, because it was just one of those things where you could just feed the wrong shit and then it would, instead of kicking it back, just eat your items and stuff like that, if I remember correctly, right, Jeremiah?
Yep. Yeah, that was always a problem. There was always the issue. I remember there was one in North Carolina, maybe. It was a centaur, and that if you were trying to turn in an item and they were non-aggressive, and if something happened while you were turning it in, he became aggressive, you just ate your item and ignored that you'd ever given it to him. And I remember personally having to file a bug for that, because I was standing there by myself. I wasn't aggressive, or he wasn't aggressive towards me, but somebody meandered into the area and he just lost his shit and charged after him. So yeah, I remember having to send that one in.
Yeah. So Interim said, items got ate all the time. I think that's one area where I would probably give some latitude for change. Yeah, we'd want to turn in and stuff not to be janky. But all the putting exclamation marks over your head and shit like that. No. And Jasmine was like, can you randomize where the quests are? I was like, that's the ticket. Let's go. Let's make it as unintuitive in that regard as possible.
Yeah, it's like always be looking for the quest guy, because that's what people want to be doing. Although it's not a bad idea. It's just, yeah, people don't want to do that.
Yeah. Well, the internet's gotten much bigger, Jeremiah. We can find 60,000 masochists and charge
That's
them
true.
$10 a month.
That is true.
Frank said Zynga was great to full-time employees, a little less so to contracted. I've run into that a bit in my experience as well, where contracted folks sometimes get left out or get forgotten about, and that's always a shame. I will say, and I'm not just trying to say it, but I'll say on the teams I've been on, we've always tried to like keep an eye out for our contractors and make them feel like they're a full-time employee whenever possible.
Yeah, and I've seen that as well. And I in that one specific of DSs, I remember them being excited, but I didn't realize that the contractors weren't getting them as well. When I found it out, it's like all of a sudden I felt like shit. It's like, but I mean, I guess now I'm technically in management. I understand that the company has abilities and blah blah blah, and how it's treated because they're a contract employee and how they get paid and gifts, blah blah blah. So it's like, from the company standpoint, it's just easier to just have this hard line that means they won't be liable for these kinds of things. Sucks, absolutely.
Yeah.
because contractors work just as hard as you do.
Yeah. Let's see. Punch You, Kick You. Spaffy Twitch. Thank you for the follows. Thank you for being here. No Turnip. Jasmine is not literal Satan. It was just an idea. What? we'll continue to work through the design ideas with her.
It is an art form.
Yeah. So just real quick while I've got you here. So going back even further, what were there things that you did? I mean, I know you said you played some pen and paper back in the day, but were there things that you think were part of just your growing up that made it so that when the opportunity presented itself to get in the industry, you knew that was the thing you wanted to do? Or
I mean, it's tough, right? Because I mean, I grew up, so for me, I grew up playing games, but I also grew up playing sports. From Texas, so played a lot of football. And for me, I assumed that I would either be working in some, textile mill or, doing something with my degree. But I mean, it's like as I graduation, I realized, man, I don't really want to do this. And I think I don't know. I mean, I don't think I'm this, but it's like, you spend 4 or 5 years, whatever, in college getting your degree, and you always have this idea that you know exactly what you want to do when you graduate, because that's what you study in school. And I came out and was like, you know what, I'm not feeling this anymore. And so for me, the game gig was kind of a nice. It was kind of a. It was a way to ensure that I was going to be making money while I figured out what exactly it was I wanted to do. And it just happened that I enjoyed it, and was able to kind of advance in the industry, and that's what kept me in. I think the reality for me is like, you get the games. I know I've talked to a lot of people who are trying to break into games. It's like, how'd you do it, man? How'd you do it? And I'm just like, honestly, I started from the ground floor, and it wasn't a dream. It wasn't my dream job to do games. It was kind of just something that landed in my lap, and I took the opportunity instead of just being like, nah, that's cool. Because it's going to be fine. I mean, I was doing it for EverQuest, so I knew I could do the job. And yeah, it and I discovered I actually had a passion for designing games as well. It's not just playing them, but actually working on them and trying to create content for people and trying to create fun people. So I mean, while I had the opportunity, I was going to take full advantage of it, and I met some really great people. And it's like, you find that the people you work with in games, like a lot of folks you work with in games, are really inspirational as well. It's like you draw from them. It's like we had some really wonderful artists, at Mythic, that would show you some stuff that they're just working on in their free time. It's like, man, that's really awesome. You feel inspired by that. It's like, you know what, we could probably use that. So, I mean, you see a story or a movie, you're like, it'd be cool if we had something, but, that was similar to that, that people could kind of enjoy, or something you'd like to work on. And so I think that just everything that you encountered in the real world could be fed in some way into the game, and or through your work. And that was, that was just fun. So, I mean, it kept you there.
Yeah. It's weird working around such talented people, like walking by somebody's monitor and seeing shit, and you're just like, how are you a human being and you're capable of just like having a blank screen and turning pixels into this? Like, it's the craziest feeling to be around like really talented programmers, really talented artists, like great storytellers, and actually be around it so much that you take it for granted. And then every once in a while, it's like a reminder of like, wow, these guys are some of the best people in their field.
But also, I'd like to add, though, it's amazing how much stuff we also drew from other existing games. Like, they say, what was it? Copying is a sincerest form of flattery. True, because it's like you play a game, you see something that's cool. Like I know there's a lot of stuff in, Camelot that was borrowed EQ. Just like I saw there was a lot of stuff in WoW that was borrowed from Camelot. I mean, it's everyone puts their spin on it, and it's cool. I mean, you see something that you worked on first, and you got out there, and then you see it somewhere else. You're like, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I thought it was fun. Like we spent a lot of time looking at how to steal stuff from, like Nintendo, right? Like
right.
it was like how do we make something that feels a little bit more like you're interacting with the world, or you have to consider like the actual space that you're in and things of that nature. So,
right.
And I'm not just saying that because of your T-shirt. Let's see. Any stories involving terms of service names that you had to change? Example, Angie says, I had a halfling druid named Porkson, your mom. I was 13 at the time and had to have a GM force change my name. So I changed to Porks and Beans.
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, in the early days of Camelot, they tried to be a little more rigorous in having more role-playing fantasy-like games. Like I remember there was a guy named Terminator or whatever, and someone reported that. I'm like, so? But it was like, well, it states that we have to have fantasy-like names. I'm like, all right, fine. That turned into some big deal, and it was like, man, this was silly. I think that actually prompted a bit of a change and kind of loosening the because it wasn't a role-playing service, a role-playing server per se. I mean, it was like the entire game, and I remember there were some things I remember having to change. It was Rumpled Foreskin. I want to say there was a Testostocles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people get really creative. People were really obsessed with poop, by the way. Like, it's amazing how many people would try to get poop in there somehow. And I don't know if you guys also experienced this, but I mean, we looked at things as kind of there were two things that we kept an eye on: time to penis and time to swastika. And the amount of time it takes when you put something new in the game before a swastika or penis gets drawn out of it or made from it, it's just fascinating to see how obsessed people are with these things.
I forget which guest it was, but we were having the conversation of time to penis. And I was explaining that there was something called TTP, time to penis.
Yep.
And I forgot about time to swastika. So TTS, which people would draw with corpses and all sorts of other stuff, items on the ground. Yeah. I those two, I guess, because they're fairly easy.
Yep.
Yeah. In terms of names, yeah, poop, penis, anything involving your mom.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and then some people were more creative and got to keep their names for a long time, like Tiggle Bitties. Yeah. So, but now he is advanced in the industry and has had to deal with players of his own. So, right on. Angie, no worries. Don't need to apologize about your mom. We saw a lot of your mom. So
yeah.
Sappy Twitch, do you guys watch Mythic Quest, parody of MMORPG Studio, and it has an entire episode dedicated to TTP? Oh yeah, that's right. That came up. Hell, I think was it Frank? Somebody actually mentioned Mythic Quest, and I wrote it down. I haven't watched it. No, it was the first I heard of it the other day on stream.
That's on like Apple TV or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I was gonna have to Google it because I'm not on the TV very much, especially lately with all the streaming.
Yeah.
Definitely check it out.
It's funny when we think about games and media. I think I always shock people when I say this, but the movie Gremlins, hate that movie just because of how it really didn't capture games and what it was like working in the gaming industry. And I thought the best representation of games when working in the industry that I remember seeing was on the season finale of Silicon, when those guys spent all that time on the board about how to draw the most efficient way to, I guess, was essentially giving you job or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's like that was games. Like they got it.
So you broke up during Grandma's Boy, right? So you're saying Grandma's Boy was not accurate, but the whiteboard scene at the end of the season
1 of Silicon Valley.
Yep. The middle out knots.
Yeah.
And why do you say that? Just because of the level of intensity that they're arguing and like whiteboarding?
Yes, because
Absolutely.
I mean, you get people who get things, and man, they have to figure it. And it can be developers and designers. But yeah, dude, I mean, like the intensity, and granted, what they were talking about, that's not so much that, it just happened to be funny, but it's just that they were willing to go the extra mile to figure this thing out. And I thought that was great.
Yeah. Like some really hardcore drawing, like it's always the like crazy drawing on the whiteboard too, where you're like really arguing about the aerodynamics of a dragon's wings or something. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, bullshit, bigger here. Like, so yeah. Let alone the actual technical arguments.
Yep.
But, yeah, man. All right. So we're creeping up on 8 o'clock my time. That means roughly 2 hours have elapsed.
Yep. I unfortunately don't have any meetings right now, so.
Yeah, that's more of a problem for you than me, but yeah. Turnip said someone drew the dick butt guy in the EC tunnel the other day. Good. I'm glad to see the players still have it in them.
Oh man, that's always good to see.
Yeah. So, all right, dude. We are hitting a point where it almost feels like a natural break. Some questions have slowed down. 2 hours makes for a nice VOD. What I'm thinking is, if you can think of anything else we need to cover right now, let's hit it. Otherwise, I'll follow up with you right after this. Inevitably, what happens is as soon as we get off, I think of a bunch of shit that I wanted to ask, and so I start lining up the second appearance.
Yep.
Hopefully, you run into some of that stuff as well and start thinking about maybe some stories. If you find any of those documents, what might be fun is go through all of your old design documents and things like that you've got stashed. And then your appearance today was pretty short notice for the community. What we can do is talk about a second appearance. We'll get all of your secrets and we'll let them know in advance, and we'll see if we can drum up some more of the old Dayak heads and folks like that.
Sure, man.
And then what I'm going to do right after this, I'll be 1,000% honest with you before I get any hangrier, is I'm going to eat a bunch of food on stream. Sorry, guys. You can all bail to other streams when that happens, but it's going to happen. All right. So
hey, my pleasure, guys.
Turnip said had to go watch the middle out scene again. Yeah. And Angie, thank you for the follow. Yeah, thanks chat for the questions. This is a fun one. This was our first guest that was basically allowing us to really focus on the rest of the industry and not just EQ development. Usually there's a lot of like super hardcore lore and EQ specific questions. But yeah, man. Thanks, Jeremiah.
Hey, my pleasure, dude. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon, like in 2 minutes after I hang up. I'll shoot you a message.
All right.
All right, dude.
Everyone have a good one.
Bye-bye.
All right. Later.